All right, looks like we are live. Welcome to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donnie, and I want to thank everybody for being here for tonight's heroic debate on evolution. The Evolution Debate Series of 2022 continues, and this is a debate. This is a matchup that a lot of people, including myself, have really been looking forward to. So tonight we have Mike from the Call Me Emo YouTube channel and Dr. Kent Hovind, who are going to be debating the important question: is there reasonable evidence for biological evolution? Mike, Dr. Hovind, thank you so much for giving us your time for tonight's important debate. All right, as we always do, gentlemen, before we get right into the party and the fun for tonight, I do want to kind of break the ice, get to know the debaters a little bit. Call me emo. Since this is your first time in the channel in a while, you have been here before. I think over a year or two ago, probably.
Yeah, probably 2 years.
Yeah. So how you been? What's going on? A little bit about you and a little bit about your YouTube channel.
Well, my name is Mikey, but I go by Call Me Emo on YouTube. By the way, are you hearing me good?
Yeah, okay. Sound good.
All right. So yeah, I go by Call Me Emo on YouTube. I don't do much like video postings. I mostly have some mirrored videos. I would occasionally appear in, like the chats or the comment sections of videos, but I don't do much video postings. I also run a Twitter account by the same Call Me Emo name. And I just decided, well, this year I should get more involved in the whole creation evolution debate thing, since I have a YouTube account, but I don't really go much. So I said, I'm going to start to get myself more involved this year.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that introduction there, Emo or Mikey. I appreciate you giving us your time for tonight's debate. Dr. Hovind, you've been a busy man. You've been doing a debate or two a week ever since we put out the Evolution Debate Challenge. And so welcome back to the program. How you been? What's going on? And a little bit about what you do.
Well, thank you for having me again. Yes, my name is Kent Hovind. I've been a Baptist preacher 47 years. Ended up teaching high school science and math 15 years, and we've done this ministry on creation versus evolution since 1989. We believe the Bible is true, and evolution is worse than stupid. It's dangerous. We tell the kids they're an animal and then wonder, why are they acting like animals? Like, duh. Not hard to figure out. So I defend the Bible as being literally true and scientifically accurate. I'm an evangelist. I want to get everybody saved, including Mike. We'll get him tonight, okay?
Okay, perfect. I appreciate it. Dr. Dino and Call Me Emo. As is typical of the last several debates we have done here, this will be a debate to remember. So real quick, before we get into it, though, I do want to, for the audience sake, go over the format for tonight. We want to cap it. We've been doing these debates have been between 2 and 3 hours. So we want to keep them at a strict hour and a half. Okay, guys. So what we want to do is make sure there's enough time for some solid audience Q&A, because we've always got a lot of great questions that come in. We're going to have the typical 12-minute opening statements, but we're going to shorten the rebuttals a little bit tonight. We're going to have a 5-minute uninterrupted rebuttal. Then we're going to focus mainly on discussion, where Mikey and Dr. Hovind can focus on the points brought up in the opening statements and discuss one topic at a time. And then we will have some really short closing statements and then some audience Q&A, guys. So make sure you're tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth. That way I don't miss them. Okay, that being said, let's get right into it. Call Me Emo. We're going to hand it over to you, my good man, for your 12-minute opening statement. And when you're good to go, the floor is yours. I understand you have some slides, so we can get those up on screen for you as well.
All right. Let me get it up.
And as you do that, I'll just kind of fill the air real quick with a reminder, guys. The Evolution Debate Challenge continues next week. This is going to be a big one. A lot of people are looking forward to this. Kent and Tom Jump, 2 seasoned debaters. They're going to be debating, is evolution a reasonable scientific theory? So here we go. Call Me Emo. I see your slides up now, and the screen looks good. Audio sounds good. Whenever you're ready.
All right, let me see. So could you see it? Is it good from here?
It looks good. Some of like the smaller words are kind of hard to make out, so I'm not sure if you want to put it full screen.
I think.
But I could always enlarge it too here like this. So that helps a little bit. So I'd say that's good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So get this up. Okay. So, from an engineering perspective, what is required for an organism to evolve an additional thoracic vertebrae? Well, it's easy, right? You just duplicate some existing vertebrae. But actually, it's a lot more complicated than that, requiring a lot more coordinated changes. Because you'll not only have to add the additional thoracic vertebrae, but you also have to add the additional bones that comes along with it, together with several additional joints, vertebral discs, dozens of additional muscles and tendons and their associated attachment points, hundreds of additional nerves and of various types, not to mention the modification of a host of other vertebral structures to accommodate these changes, and those changes must happen in conjunction with a host of other body-wide changes that would include, but not limited to, modification of locomotion to accommodate a longer spine, modification of the placement of inner organs to fit a longer body cavity, and modification of the brain to send and receive signals from these newly evolved structures. And again, it's not just a simple matter of duplicating existing parts, because all these parts must be added in the correct numbers, articulations, juxtapositions, and symmetries relative to their positions in the body and relative to the structures that surround them. A feat of engineering that is so coordinatedly complex that creationists argue that such things are just impossible to evolve. But guess what? We've actually observed this type of thing evolving, and in the exact same way I've just described, all without intelligent input, and despite the creationist arguments to the contrary. Well, you'll think after knowing this, creationists would at least make some considerations before making these kinds of arguments, but no. All they do is try to minimize the refutation by arguing that it must have been pre-programmed to do so, jump onto some other biological phenomena, and then make the exact same argument. Because it doesn't just end there at complex coordinated anatomical changes. For example, here we have ID proponent arguing that the waiting time for eel pouch to evolve 30 duplicates of a particular gene should be no less than 3 billion years, meaning that it's impossible for the fish to have acquired these duplicates in the mere 50 million years as proposed by evolution. Now, little did he know that dogs managed to evolve up to 28 copies of a particular gene, AMYB2, in less than 15,000 years after they diverged from wolves, a far cry from the billions of years he thinks is required to produce them. Now, instead of conceding to this kind of refutation, a creationist would just simply argue that, well, it must have been pre-programmed to do so. Creationists arguing that egg laying to live birth can't happen, but as soon as we observe it happening, well, it must have been pre-programmed to do so. Non-adaptive order or phyllotaxis. We observe it happening, it was pre-programmed to do so. Endosymbiosis. We observe it happening, it was pre-programmed to do so. Multicellularity. Then we observe it happening, it was pre-programmed to do so. So we see here a general trend. A creationist would argue that some given biological phenomenon can't evolve because, but as soon as you can demonstrate it evolving, well, then it must have been pre-programmed to do so. Now, this, of course, begs the question, how do we know what was pre-programmed from what was not? Or in other words, how do we identify the descendants of an original design, all without undermining the arguments we're trying to make? And by not undermining the arguments you're trying to make, then what do I mean? So by way of example, let's take an article where Casey Luskin was criticizing homology from, amongst other things, that there are alternative explanations that could explain the same data, but most of all, that homology is a circular argument. See, the problem is, these criticisms were being made on the same website where Casey Luskin was arguing that, for example, Homo sapiens are related to Neanderthals and Denisovans based solely on their similarities. See, the reason behind this obvious logical contradiction is because similarities can be used to determine ancestry regardless of any apparent circularity. And this circularity isn't due to some kind of flaw in the evolutionist argument. No, it's a fact of life. regardless of if you like it or not. And thus, a more productive argument to engage in here is, where does similarity due to common ancestry break down, and how can we tell, all without undermining the arguments we're trying to make? Now, what's ironic though about creationists criticizing homology for being circular is the complete lack of self-awareness in the fact that their alternative explanation, common design, is itself a circular argument. Anyway, so whilst on the topic of undermining one's own arguments, let's say I were to ask Kent if you'd accept that all the members of the species Cucurbita pepo share common ancestry. Well, he'd most likely say, yeah, they're just varieties of the same species. But let's say I were to ask a more in-depth question like, oh, I don't know, how would you reconstruct the relationships amongst these organisms? Meaning, how would you tell who is most closely related to whom, and so on? Well, guess what? He'd have to rely on the same type of phylogenetic principles and logic that he so loves to criticize to even vaguely attempt to answer such a question. Nevertheless, whatever method he uses to answer the question itself begs the question, where and why does this logic break down? But wait, I hear a creationist cry. All right, Emo, I would agree that we can use similarities to determine ancestry, and that we can use phylogenetic principles and logic to reconstruct the relationships among organisms we accept are related based on their similarities, but only up to a point, meaning that only the similarities within kinds can be used to determine ancestry, and that the similarities between kinds cannot be used to determine ancestry. For example, the similarities between different varieties of bananas can be used to determine ancestry among them because they're obviously the same kind of organisms. But the similarities between, say, bananas and crocodiles cannot be used to determine ancestry because they're obviously different kinds of organisms. But herein lies the problem. See, nothing about Brahmanology implies that different kinds must be distinctly different. In fact, more often than not, the differences within a kind more often than not, you can have more differences within a kind as compared to the differences between neighboring kind. In other words, the differences between kinds can fall well within the range of accepted diversity. Oh, sorry, my bad. In other words, the differences between kinds can fall well within the range of biodiversity creationists already accept can happen. This means that there is no objective reason why one kind can't share common ancestry with the kinds closest to them, and to those the kinds closest to them, and so on and so on. It also means that any request by a creationist to provide evidence of evolution sufficient to account for the differences between kinds is rather redundant, or at most, disingenuous. Oh, okay. By way of illustrations, let me illustrate what I'm talking about. So these are the same kind of crocodilians, and these are different kinds of crocodilians. These are the same kinds of turtles, and these are different kinds of turtles. The same kinds of frogs, and these are different kinds of frogs. All right? And I'm not pulling a prank here. This is actually how creationists classify these organisms themselves. So we see here that the variation within kinds can be indistinguishable from the variation between them. Now, this begs the question, what's allowing for organisms within a kind to share ancestry, and what's preventing them from sharing ancestry with the kinds closest to them? Now, to be fair, creationists have given explanations for the former, but they've never given any explanation for the latter that isn't immediately negated by the explanation given for the former. Okay. Now, given how diverse organisms within kinds can be, like, for example, the stone fruit kind, or the cactus kind, or even the nightshade kind, and the fact that organisms can be pre-programmed to diversify, what is the limit on the amount of heterozygosity that can be placed into some given starting population? So meaning, can bananas be related to plantains, bloggers, and other members within the genus Musa? Can all Musa be related to themselves and any other members within the genus Musella? Can these two genera be related to themselves and any other members within the family Musaceae? Can all Musaceae be related to themselves and any other members within the families Strelitziaceae or Heliconiaceae? Can these families be related to themselves and any other families within the order Zingiberellus, like this one, or this one, or this one, or this one? Can all Zingiberellus be related to themselves and any other members within the orders Alismetalis or Camillianus? And so on and so on. What can and cannot be related under the created heterozygosity hypothesis, or in other words, what are the limitations of omnipotence with respect to pre-programmed biodiversity, and how do we determine that, all without undermining the arguments we're trying to make? All right, I think that's it.
Okay, I appreciate that opening statement there, Emo. I appreciate the visuals, always helpful, and I always appreciate that. And also with a few minutes to spare. So that's perfect. Few minutes we can toss into the audience Q&A, because as always with our fantastic audience, we've got a ton of great questions flying in. So we are now going to hand it over to Dr. Dino himself for his 12-minute opening statement. Whenever you're ready, go ahead, brother.
Well, thank you, sir, and thank you for coming on the program. I'd like to get down to Grenada and see the place. I've heard you got some sinners down there. We'll see if we can take care of that for you. I believe the Bible is true. The Bible says 10 times in the first chapter, they will bring forth after their kind. Determining exactly what a kind is might be a little difficult. Determining what a species is very difficult, and there's lots of arguments about that to this day. It's a big argument over all kinds of things. We covered that in the last debate, I believe, or 2 debates ago. So the Bible says they can bring forth after their kind. So if they're able to bring forth, they're certainly the same kind. And if they've diversified to the point where they can no longer bring forth, like a Chihuahua and a Great Dane, they're still a dog, but would be considered a different species? Probably not. Still a dog species, Canis domesticus. But it's obviously no longer capable of bringing forth. But I think that the details that you're picking out here, Mike, are so minor compared to the bigger picture. To see the fact that there's a variety of fern plants that we've decided to call a different species, that is not evidence that fern plants are related to whales. You guys have gone nuts on this evolution thing. You see the variations within kinds, which are amazing, and then assume that that means everything's related, which is not common sense. They make these family trees like this, showing an amoeba or protista, a single-celled creature evolving into a biology professor. That is not evident. That's not science. The purpose of the debate tonight is for you to present evidence of evolution. I don't think there is any. The family trees the kids are taught in textbooks show plants, animals, and fungi all have a common ancestor. This is baloney. This is drawing lines on paper. So I'll ask you later, Mike, do you believe you are related to a fern or a mosquito? Outside this circle, we see all kinds of variations within the bats. I think there are now 1,100 varieties of bats. Okay, it's still a bat. 339 breeds of dogs. There's still a dog. Everything inside that circle is religion. You believe, given enough time. If we go back, you can't go back. We can go forward and we can see the present. We can see dogs producing dogs today. You guys believe a dog came from an amoeba. I'd like to see the evidence of an amoeba ever producing anything that was not an amoeba. They can have a pretty short generation time. I don't know what amoeba look that up, would you, Matt? What's the generation time for amoeba? 20, 30 minutes? See if you can find out, can you? So to say that they're all related just because you can draw lines on paper is not science. They talk about primitive unicellular organisms. There's no such thing as a primitive unicellular organism. If it's alive, it's complicated. A single cell is more complicated than the space shuttle. So there's no such thing as a primitive unicellular organism. That unicellular organism can move generally. They can reproduce. They can respond to their environment. They are incredibly complicated. Some have a little flagellated paramecium, the flagella on there, connected to a little motor that turns 8 million cycles per second or something like that. It's huge, unreal. You think that happened by chance? For no reason. Religious speculation is inside this circle. Let me draw the line here. It is pure religion for you to believe that crocodiles are related to birds and humans. Now, you're welcome to believe that, but don't call it science. And you're supposed to offer evidence showing that there's a variety of crocodiles, and there's quite a variety of them, quite a few variations. And I don't know if they all came from a common ancestor. It's not my job to prove that tonight. It's your job to prove evidence for evolution. All we've seen is variations of crocodiles. Now, if you wish to believe it goes beyond that, where crocodiles and frogs are related to a pine tree, that's religion. I don't know how you guys can't see it. This one shows turtles and birds and mammals have a common ancestor. They drew a bunch of lines on paper. That's all they did. That's all they ever do. Drawing lines on paper between modern birds, Archaeopteryx, all going back to a common ancestor, which was a single-celled creature. This isn't science. That's my whole argument. Evolution is imagination, and you guys have a wild imagination. I'll give you that. You and SpongeBob ought to be buddies here. But it's not science. Science is what we can observe, study, test, and demonstrate. We observe crocodiles produce crocodiles. That's been observed. It has not been observed. They've gone ever beyond that. Now, if you wish to muddy the water and say, well, they're called a different species, okay, but it's still the same kind of animal. Flowering plants appeared in the lower Cretaceous. There's no such thing as a Cretaceous period. There's no such thing as a geologic column. All the layers formed at one time, or nearly all of them, during Noah's flood. But they draw these lines on paper to say that they're related. Rice is related to moss. Wow. And papaya, all related because they drew lines on paper. Here they have the elephant related to the dolphin. You're welcome to believe that, but that's not science. It's a religious belief. God said he created everything, even the invisible things of him. There's a lot of invisible things man's never seen. An atom, never seen a proton or electron or neutron. We've never seen gravity. We don't know what light is for sure, but we know what it does and how fast it goes and all that, but we don't know what it is. Give me a jar of it, paint it red. So they're without excuse, the Bible says. They knew God, but they glorified him not as God. Mike, I hope that's not your situation. I hope you're an honest seeker and say, well, I would like to know the truth. If there's a God, would you follow him? If he walked up to you and tapped you on the shoulder and said, Mike, I created all this. I'm God. Watch this. I'll walk on water. I'll call down fire from heaven, whatever. He's not going to do those signs for you, but if he did, would you believe? Would you follow him? Do you have any faith? The Bible says in 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth. So dinosaurs lived with man. He made them all in 6 days. Bible dates add up to about 6,000. I believe that. Jesus said man brought death into the world. The pre-flood world was very different according to the Bible. Those people lived to be 900 years old. Get my chart on that, and I'll send you one if you'd like. My timeline that we use for placemats when skeptics come for dinner. The Bible says before the flood came, Adam lived to be 930. Methuselah was 969. They lived a long time. There's a lot of legends about what's called the golden age, when man used to live to be 1,000. I think that's true. They did live to be 900. Giant fossils have been found of many animals. Giant fossil butterflies, fossil camels, 15 feet tall, fossil beavers, 8 feet long. I think things were much bigger before the flood when they were living longer. This was not millions of years ago. Thousands of historical accounts link dinosaurs with humans. A lot of ancient artwork does the same thing. Some may still be alive. I cover all that in my video number 3. So that's for Jared. Let's see. I believe the Bible says in the last days there will be scoffers who scoff at the Bible because they want to walk after their lust. They don't like God's rules, like thou shalt not commit adultery. Oh, they don't like that one, so let's just deny God exists. Ignore him. Just race down the highway and pretend there's no such thing as a policeman. Okay, see how far that gets you. Bible says the scoffers are going to be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood. This world was destroyed by a flood. That flood of Noah is what made all those layers. We probably made Grand Canyon in a week. The earth is not billions of years old. There's no geologic column. The Bible says the scoffers are also ignorant of the coming judgment of the Lord, the day of judgment. 3 things the scoffers are ignorant of: the creation. What was it like? Why did they live to be 900? Why did reptiles live to be 900 and grow to be 60 feet long? Dinosaurs. What about the flood? Where did all the water come from? Where did it go? We cover all that in our video series. You can get on drdino.com if you want a whole lot more on that. $50 for the whole thing. Get rid of the glare off. Okay, there. $50 for the whole seminar series if you want to get that 18 hours. And then watch it, return it, and get your money back. So Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning. Have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, talking about Adam and Eve? Same thing in Mark 10:6. He said that was the beginning of the creation. So for someone to say the earth is billions of years old is calling Jesus a liar, which you're welcome to do. I don't think it'll bode well for your judgment day, but the Bible says man brought death into the world. Death reigned from Adam to Moses. By man came death. Evolution says death brought man into the world. See, evolution is a religion of death. If one animal does evolve a little better than the rest of them have to die to get that good, new, improved gene to take over the population and slowly evolve to something else. I don't think you guys have thought it through. Your religion requires billions and trillions of things to die in order to advance. We've never seen that. It's not science, it's not observable, but you believe it. But it's a religion of death. Question is simple. Why is there sin in the world? Matter of fact, if evolution is true, what is right and wrong? What would be a sin? Is it a sin for me to walk in and murder somebody? Well, yeah. Well, why? The lion does it to the baby zebra all the time. Is that a sin? Should we go shoot all the lions because they're killing baby zebras? You evolutionists have no standard for measuring right and wrong. You have to borrow Christian standards. Where is the standard for right and wrong? The Bible says man brought death into the world. God made a perfect world and man wrecked it. Jesus said the beginning was when God made Adam and Eve. The Bible says nothing died till Adam sinned. And you add up the dates, you're going to get about 6,000. But see, I don't have to defend the Bible tonight. Mike, you have to give us evidence for evolution. Where exactly is the evidence? Let's see, I've got one more I wanted to get in my last second here. 319, enter. Professor Dave said the evidence for evolution comes from homology. Look how similar we are. Yeah, that doesn't prove relationship. He said it proves a common ancestry. No, it doesn't. It might prove the same designer. Fords and Chevys both have 4 tires, round ones, out of rubber. Well, that proves they're related. No, it's a design that works. 2 bones in the wrist is necessary to make a lot of different movements. It's pretty handy. I use mine all the time. So this is not proof of common ancestry. They talk about homology as evidence for evolution. That's been proven wrong since 1874. Those are not gill slits. They're still using the same dumb drawings that Haeckel made back 1869 that were proven wrong 5 years later. Talk about vestigial structures. That's losing, not gaining. That's not evidence for evolution. And we can so bring up your evidence, Mike. I want to hear what exactly makes you believe that you are related to a fern. I'd like to know why. Why would you believe that? Go ahead. I'll yield my time.
Thank you, Dr. Dino, for that opening statement. That concludes the opening statements. Gentlemen, call me Emo and Dr. Hovind. So we are now moving into the 5-minute uninterrupted rebuttal, and then we will jump into an open discussion. So call me Emo. We're going to hand it over to you. The floor is yours. Whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes for a response.
All right. So let me see. So I'd just like to respond to the arguments first, and then I would answer some of the questions you asked. So he was talking about the differences between like kinds and species, meaning that there is no concrete definition for a species, and therefore, we can't claim to identify species objectively. Basically, that's the argument, right? And he was saying, okay, well, I can't define kinds, and you can't define species. But the thing is, evolution is not arguing that there are objectively distinct groups of organisms that are unrelated to each other. We're arguing that there is life as a continuum from one group of organisms to the next. So the mere fact that we can't define species objectively is actually a testament to the fact that life is a fluid dynamic. The problem is actually on Kent's side, because kinds are actually defined as distinct groups of organisms that are not related. So the mere fact that he's unable to give a definition that would separate kinds from each other objectively, it kind of undermines the argument that kinds are in fact unrelated. let me see if I can share a screen for a bit. I gotta do that again. No.
It's up on screen there, Emo.
Okay. Where would it start from? Okay, let's see. Okay, so you talked about family trees and lines on paper. They're basically the same argument. But this is actually how creationists depict relationships between organisms, right? They use lines to indicate how organisms are related to each other, which ones are most closely related to which. This is a creationist cladogram, copied from the original. This here is a cladogram made by Nathaniel Jensen, where he's using lines. Mind you, he's using lines to indicate the relationships, but in addition to that, he is using lines to make additional argument based on the arrangement of the lines. So he's arguing that because these lines arrange themselves into particular haplogroups, then this would be evidence for creationism. Now, it's fascinating to hear that Kent doesn't agree that using lines to represent relationships is valid, and I'm very interested in how he would represent the relationships amongst organisms that he accepts are related. So let's say we're talking about dogs. If I ask, can you depict for me, at least reconstruct the relationships, what would you use to indicate who is most closely related to whom, if not by the use of lines? What else? So he asked about, let me just get to this one. Am I there? Right. He asked about dogs giving birth to dogs, and you wanted to see, I forgot the actual organism name, but it's basically dogs only give birth to dogs, but they never give birth to non-dogs. The problem with that is according to how you're using the word dog, the answer would vary. So it's based on context. If you're using the word dog with respect to a group of organisms as different from a clade, then yeah, dogs can give birth to non-dogs. All you need to do is change the name of the offspring or the name of the lineage, and you'd get a non-dog that way. Although be it's not going to be a spectacular event. If you're using dog in terms of a clade, then dogs could never give birth to non-dogs because you can never outgrow your clade, regardless of how much you change. All would happen is that names would just be accumulated on top of each other. So that's why, for example, you have Canis, that's wolves and dingoes and so on. Then you have Canis lupus, which is wolves. Then you have Canis lupus familiaris, this is domestic dogs. And let's say you're talking about a poodle, you have Canis lupus familiaris poodle. So you just keep adding clade names as more clades evolve, but you always retain all your clade names from which you descend. So to understand this by way of example, so we all know that the evolution of brassicas, this is a familiar plant, a group of plants. And the question would ask, well, if wild mustards only give birth to wild mustards, then how do we get Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, and broccoli from wild mustards if they only produce wild mustards? Well, this is just a simple matter of reassigning a name to the group. So all they did was reassign a name to the group, and then you have wild mustards giving rise to broccoli, although they only give birth to wild mustards. So that's how organisms change their names. You talked about common design. Common design. The thing about common design is the argument is not that necessarily what we see in nature is inconsistent with intelligent design, therefore I reject intelligent design. The argument is actually the things are consistent with intelligent design, that's why I reject intelligent design. Now, to explain myself in a little more detail, is anything would be consistent with intelligent design. Any arrangement of parts in an organism found with any arrangement of parts, any features found in an organism would be consistent with design, whereas with evolution, there are things that can violate evolution. Like for example,
1 minute.
Okay. We can predict that, for example, we would never find any arthropods with any mammalian style or any vertebrate style inner air system, because it's near impossible, in fact impossible, to derive the same homologous structure starting from different starting templates. Right? You can get convergent evolution where things look superficially similar, but you can't get the same thing from a different starting template due to the limitations of how organisms evolve. In design, there is no such prediction as to why we don't find these things, because any such prediction would, you're in fact saying God couldn't create that, right? And even if you found that, that would just be the designer using existing parts in different ways. But evolution can't do that. So I can predict that we would never find any arthropod with any system like this. All right. You talked about homology. Well, the mere fact that creationists use extinct fauna to classify them with extant ones or extinct ones amongst themselves, it means that you're already using homology. And with the losing on gaining, when you're modifying one thing into the next, I don't have a slide for that. When you're modifying one thing into another, it kind of necessitates that you lose the function you had previously to gain a new one. So you modify scissors into pliers, you lose the ability to cut fabric, and then you gain the ability to pinch and cut wires.
All right, I appreciate that rebuttal there. Call me emo. I did about 6 minutes there. I understand 5 minutes can go by quickly, plus the time it takes to pull up slides and things like that. So to be fair, we got 6 minutes and equal time as always. So Dr. Dino, we're going to hand it over to you now. And you have 6 minutes for an uninterrupted response.
Well, thank you, sir. What is a kind exactly? The Bible uses that word 20 times in the first 7 chapters. People are often asking the biblical definition of kind, specific body plan, for instance. 3 different definitions of kind. People complain about this. I do debates all the time. You just said, Mike, you can never outgrow your clade. Really? A clade is a group of organisms believed to have evolved from a common ancestor. Well, then that includes everybody. You believe everything came from a common ancestor. So what exactly is a clade? It looks like there would only be one clade, living things. You can never outgrow your ancestor. Let's see. Now, species, a kind or sort. A species is defined as a group of animals that actually or potentially interbreed in nature. The definition of species is a group of interbreeding individuals, cannot be easily applied to organisms. It's difficult to define exactly what a species is. Now, you said, Mike, they cannot outgrow their clade. Would you tell me then, why did they put birds in one clade and dinosaurs in a different clade and worms in a different clade and sharks in a different clade, and all showing back to a common ancestor, which was an amoeba, single-celled creature? If single-celled creatures like amoeba is a clade, everybody outgrew it. Every living form on the planet outgrew it. You guys don't understand. You're not making sense. What exactly is this kind? What is a species? Nobody's got a good definition of species. Let me get back up here to where I wanted to be. So, right here. A species. A biological species is a group of organisms that can reproduce with one another in nature and produce fertile offspring. That's a reasonable definition. I don't think a pine tree and a dog can produce any fertile offspring. I don't think a dog and a cat can produce fertile offspring. I don't think a dog and a frog can produce fertile offspring. I think they're obviously the same, different kinds of animals, okay? What is a species and examples? Definition of species, a group of animals, plants, or other living things that share common ancestors and are all classified as alike in some manner. Oh, well, I'd say pickles and pine trees are not alike in probably most manners. I think they're probably a different species. How many definitions of species are there? There are 7 distinct definitions of species and 27 variations and mixtures. What are the 3 types of species, the 4 types, the 7 types? Why is it difficult to define species? You guys are all upset about creationists not being able to give an airtight definition of kind. The burden of proof's not on us. We're not asking you to teach our theory in schools. You're demanding we all pay for your religion to be taught. I think the burden of proof's on you. What exactly is a species? It's hard to define a species because it's hard to determine when a population of organisms can or cannot reproduce. It is difficult. The classification system. 18th century, Carolus Linnaeus made up the current system we use: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Okay, this is from right there, 18th century. The science of classification is far from dead. Classification of many species, old and new, continues to be hotly disputed as scientists find new information. Arguments are fierce, and species do change names. One of the new reasons why species are being reevaluated is because of DNA. Well, before they even could see the DNA, they already had them classified. And by your definition of a clade, there's only one clade: living organisms. System of classification has been existed for 300 years, and it's constantly evolving. Right, cute word. Radical shift in grouping of animals, because scientists are debating which species are most closely related and why. The creationists can't always tell you exactly which kinds are the same. I think generally, though, it's pretty simple. I'll show you how to tell. Okay, the Bible says they bring forth after their kind, after their kind. There's an excellent article on a YouTube channel. What is a kind? Genesis Apologetics won't say. Not that one. That's not the one that I was going to go to. Right here. 99.999% of the cases, it's easy for a 5-year-old to tell you what the same kind is. Some plants are very difficult to classify. Some animals are difficult to classify. Where would you put a platypus? Let's see, animals that are hard to classify. Echidna, platypus, the bat. Where does that go? Hard to classify. Why? Difficult to classify. Where do you put an armadillo? What's that? And you guys keep thinking each animal has to be related to something else. Maybe none of them are related. They just all had a designer who designed a bunch of cool designs. They're not related at all. They just have a common designer. Species difficult to classify for taxonomists. Why is it difficult to classify organisms? Why is it sometimes a difficulty to classify organisms? It is. Sometimes it's difficult to classify because some organisms may seem to fall into multiple categories. Single-celled organism called Euglena, which has characteristics of different groups. It has chloroplasts like a plant, but it doesn't have a cell wall like animals. It has a flagella like bacteria. Where are you going to put it? The point is, viruses are more difficult to classify. That's another one.
1 minute.
I think with most of the cases, if you want to know if it's the same kind, ask the males. Turn the male donkeys loose. All they look for is the female donkeys. We're not interested in the pine tree. They're not interested in the frog. Most of the time, they can tell you what the same kind is. So, but again, the burden of proof's on you to prove where's the evidence of these things evolving into a different kind. Or different clade. Where's the evidence? I want to see that. Go ahead.
Okay, gentlemen, I appreciate the rebuttals from the both of you. Fantastic debate so far. Lots of great points to discuss. So here we go. We are now into the discussion portion of tonight's debate. What is the topic? Is there reasonable evidence for biological evolution? As always, let's do our best to stick to one topic at a time as we discuss each of the points in a professional manner. I'll kind of stand back a little bit as moderator to keep you guys free-flowing and organic, and I'll, of course, step in as needed. So let's call me Emo. Let's have you start us off in this discussion since Kent just ended with his rebuttal. Whatever first points you want to make and a first question, go ahead, gentlemen.
All right. So I know you asked for evidence of like a kind giving rise or giving birth to another kind of organism. But the thing is, no creationist has ever proposed any set of criteria as to what would constitute a change in kind. Now, they have identified different kinds. I know what different kinds look like, but they've never set criteria as to what would constitute a new kind, or how much a kind can diversify before it becomes a new kind.
Okay. I think it's been pretty well recognized. There are 250 breeds of cattle. I think most 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds would say it's the same kind. So of the 250 types of cattle in the world, how far is there a limit? How far they can be? Man has created most of these through selective breeding to get more milk or more beef or more disease resistance or handle cold climate, or they can select for certain traits that already exist in the cattle gene code. You could never select through natural selection, create a cow with wings. Never going to happen. It's not there. It's not available to choose from. So I'd say, to answer your question, the variations that we've always observed are limited to the same kind. It's still a cow or still corn. I forget how many varieties of corn there are now. It's into the, let's see, how many? 12,000 species of corn. Man has created most of them, again, to suit his climate or his certain needs, but it's still corn. It never goes beyond that, never. But in your religion, Mike, you believe corn is related to a whale. Why do you believe such a thing? We see variations and they're limited. Always they stop, and there's a limit. But you guys have corn connected back to corn and a whale connected back to a common ancestor. I resent paying for that to be taught to the kids in school. Go start a private school, teach that to whoever wants to pay and come learn it. But that's not science. There's no evidence of any animal. 300 types of octopus in the world might have had a common ancestor. But you guys want me to believe that's evidence that the octopus and the corn have a common ancestor with the lion and the humans and the dinosaurs. These lines on paper are pure propaganda. They're absolute bold-faced lie. Okay?
Go ahead, Emo.
All right. So you're talking about the cows, for example. So the reason why cows or cattle only produce cattle is because that's the name we assign to them. If you want to see a cattle produce a non-cattle, it's just a matter of name reassignment. You talk about corn being related to corn, but do you know that corn and bamboo and sugarcane and rice are all classified in the same kind by creationist barmenologists?
I'm not sure I heard the question clearly. Are what all the same kind by creationists? The cattle?
No, I'm saying like corn, rice, bamboo, and sugarcane.
Yeah. In the grass family, there's quite a variety. I'm not sure exactly how we should classify that. People still argue about exactly what's a different kind. There are hundreds of varieties of bamboo, maybe even thousands of varieties. But if to stick with the cow example you started with, you said if we give it a different name, it's now a different kind. Okay, let's call the white and black one at the top a frog. There, we got evolution. We changed it to white and black. Now it's a frog because I gave it a different name. No, it's still a cow. Zebus, bison, yak, buffalo might have all had a common ancestor. I don't know. Doesn't matter to me. I think they probably did. I think whether they're still interfertile, I don't know. God might have made 10 different kinds of cows, and now there's 250. But they're still cow. So to see the 12,000 varieties of corn and see, wow, that proves corn and cows are related. I'll just ask you that simple question. Do you believe corn and cows are related to a common ancestor?
Right. So before I answer that question, let me get back to the cows one. What I was saying is that if you want a cow to produce a non-cow, then you change the name. It's just a name reassignment, right? I don't know what would constitute a new kind because there is no criteria given for how diverse organisms must become before they pass that threshold for where a kind ends and where one begins. I don't know that. So I won't be able to show you that. You would have to provide that criteria and then identify it, because that's not something we do. Creationists identify.
Okay.
Creationists identify. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. No, I was getting to the question. Yeah.
Okay. Do you believe cows have ever produced a non-cow?
Right. So cows would not produce non-cows unless somebody reassigns the name to them. Just like the wild mustards only produced wild mustards until someone reassigned the name broccoli, and then reassigned the name cabbage, reassigned the name cauliflower, and so on.
Okay. This chart shows corn and octopus having a common ancestor, which was an amoeba. So apparently the amoeba produced something that was non-amoeba trillions of times to change it to an octopus. Where's the evidence of an amoeba ever producing a non-amoeba?
Right. Again, we're back to the name assignment. So I gave an example of this with brassica already, where wild mustards produce things that are no longer called wild mustards. But that's how it happens through name assignment.
Our kale and broccoli came from the wild mustard plant. They are still the same kind. They're still a plant. They're still a green plant. They're still mostly unable to survive on their own. You have to babysit them, plant them all in the field, and watch over the field. Most of them, if you turned them all loose, within a few hundred years, they'd all revert back to the wild mustard. That's probably the only one that survived. It's like the Chihuahuas we have, 99 here, Alt-DV. There are now 339 recognized breeds of dogs. Most of them wouldn't survive out in the woods for 2 days. Man has created them for our pleasure, either for hunting or for comfort or to be a lap dog or guard dog. But as far as surviving on their own, like the wolf, most of them couldn't do it. So the fact that we gave it a new name and call it dog instead of wolf or coyote, it's still the same kind of animal. But it's not my burden to have to prove that, Mike. It's your burden to prove, where's the evidence of a dog ever producing a non-dog? You said a cow can't produce a non-cow, but yet you believe an amoeba did produce a non-amoeba. I mean, that's what the chart shows. Let's see, right there. Everything.
The amoeba would produce offspring that would vary from the parent, right? But
within limits.
I'm sorry?
Within limits, it's still an amoeba. I don't know how many varieties of amoeba there are, but it'd still be a single-celled organism. Where's the evidence of an amoeba producing a 2-celled or a 3-celled? Because octopus have a whole lot more than 2 cells. There is no evidence for an amoeba changing to anything other than amoeba. Go ahead.
Right. So there are experiments to show that single-cell organisms can evolve into multicellular organisms. That has been demonstrated. But I'm saying the amoeba producing a non-amoeba, that wouldn't happen. It's just what happens is the amoeba would produce offspring that would vary, and then someone would come retroactively reassign the name of the organism. That's what happened with wild mustard. So wild mustards changed until someone decided, oh, this wild mustard seems a bit different to its ancestors. So I'm going to reassign the name. I'm going to call it broccoli. So that's how it happens.
I think you'll find they took the wild mustard plant, and through selective breeding, they decided what they wanted. They wanted more seeds, more leaf, more stem, more deeper roots, able to handle the cold better. That's what happened with the dogs. Somebody decided, I want dogs with long, thick hair so they can survive the cold up in Alaska. And they crossed them until they got a husky. They survived just fine up there. You bring the huskies down to the desert, they don't do very well. They got too much hair, they thick body, they can't get rid of heat fast enough. They would suffer in the heat. Whereas if you take a dog like a dingo or a greyhound, thin fur, short fur, long legs, skinny body, they do really well in the heat. They couldn't survive Alaska, but they could survive Arizona. But they're still a dog. Somebody selected that. They didn't select it on their own. Now, if you turned all the dogs loose in Alaska, probably only those that have that already existing thick fur coat would survive. Next year, they get to make the puppies for the next generation. And after a couple of years of that, you're going to have all dogs that look like a husky or a wolf. That's the only kind that survives up there. That's not evolution. That's not creating anything new. It's still a dog. But you have to see from these charts, the amoeba did produce something that was non-amoeba. Actually, it produced everything. And yet amoeba are still having babies today, and we don't see anything in the laboratory. We don't see anything in nature of them ever doing anything to make more baby amoebas. So this is why I say evolution is imagination. It is SpongeBob. Imagine it happened. It's not science. Go ahead.
Right. So again, the amoeba only produces amoeba because that's the name we chose to call them and their offspring. It's what you're talking about is name assignment. That's what you're actually talking about, because it doesn't matter how much the organisms change. The name doesn't have to change. For example, let's say, for example, in a hypothetical scenario, if pigs evolve wings, would that count as a macroevolutionary change, or would it not count because they're still pigs?
If elephants could fly, what would that prove? They can't fly. You're talking about a nonsense question here. Pigs don't have wings. Now, could it be
a hypothetical question?
Sure. Well, could it be that if an animal in its past, the ancestors used to have wings, maybe an emu? We've got emus here. They got little tiny wings, seem to be pretty useless. Maybe they used to be bigger in the past, and they're slowly losing them because they don't use them. Could be, I don't know. Still a wing, but it's not adding information, it's losing. If the pig had wings millions of years ago, like you guys believe, and it lost them, and you were able to regrow them, I'd like to see the thing fly. We got some pigs here, you can barely pick them up, let alone fly. So I think it's a nonsense hypothetical question. They don't have wings. Pigs always produce pigs.
No,
I didn't look at it. Go ahead.
I'm talking about the changes between them. I'm asking if, like, a pig, as we know them, if they evolve wings, if that change would count as a macroevolutionary change, or would it not count as a macroevolutionary change because it's still called a pig? So it does the name mean anything, or is it change we're talking about?
Well, the name's already changed from language to language. What we call dog, the Mexicans call perro. Did that change it to something else? No, it's the language changed. So changing the name is not going to do anything for it. It's still the same animal. Let's see, there are 300 varieties of pigs worldwide. I think they all produce pigs. I just Googled it. So I don't think you're going to get one with wings, no.
No, again, that was just a hypothetical question, because what I'm trying to find out is what change would count as a change in kind, and not the name of the organism. So I'm not interested in, like, this organism is called an amoeba, or it's called a dog, or it's called a cow. I'm interested in what either physiological or genetic change would count as a macroevolutionary change. But I'm not interested in the name change, because we can always reassign names to organisms, as we did with the broccoli, but you said that wouldn't count as a macroevolutionary change. So we need to know what change would count. Because I can show you change, but then I don't know what would count, at least to you, or to creationists, what would count as a macroevolutionary change, because that criteria has not yet been given.
Yeah, I think you're asking a question that doesn't have a logical answer. Nobody's ever seen this happen. Science deals with what we can observe and study. Show me an example that has happened where an animal produced something that you think is a different kind and deserves a different name and would count as macroevolution. The burden of proof's on you, not me. I don't know of any. I don't think anybody's ever seen any, but if you know of one, I'd like to see it. It's imagination. We don't see it happen. I don't think it can happen, so I can't give you an example of one.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to show you that because I don't know what would count as a new kind of organism. I can show you what macroevolution is as defined by biologists, which would be speciation. But I know creationists don't use macroevolution in that way. So I have to show you macroevolution in the context you're using it in, not in the context I'm using it in, right? But that word macroevolution, as you use it, it is undefined. It has no criteria. So then I don't know what to show you.
Okay. The charts in the school textbooks, like the one I have on screen here, show every living thing, plants and animals, all of them came from a common ancestor, an amoeba. So the amoeba did outgrow its clade, that's for sure. If it turned into a dinosaur and a pig and a bear, it did. We don't see any of this. They drew lines on paper connecting, let's see, the corn to the lion, to the whale, to the dinosaur, and humans, back to an amoeba. Where's the evidence of an amoeba producing a non-amoeba? You got to start there, because you believe everything came from it. So if you can't outgrow your clade, as you said, apparently they did. All of them did. You're saying we can't now? That would fit the biblical definition. They're going to bring forth after their kind. Instead of all this being one family tree, I think there's probably 8,000 different trees. There's a tree of pigs and a tree of corn and a tree of cows, but they don't go back to touch each other ever. They've always been pigs, cows, or corn, or people. We've never seen any change. We see some pretty wild variations within that kind. I think there's 1,100 varieties of apples. Man has created most of them. Some get more juice, some can handle the heat better, some can handle the cold better, some are crispier, sweeter, whatever, but they're still apple. They're limited to the same kind, still an apple. Excuse me, go ahead.
All right. So with the clades thing, let me explain what's going on. So you said you showed a whale. I think I'm seeing a dinosaur, corn, and humans. They all belong to the eukaryotic clade, right? And what happens is when clades, can you hear me? Right. I think you're on. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Actually, because you're on mute, can you repeat the last maybe 3 seconds of what you were saying?
Okay. The eukaryote simply means the cell has a nucleus bound in a membrane. That doesn't prove any relationship. I'd say we could classify all the cars in the world by those that have an engine in front and those that have an engine in the back. Does that prove anything? No, just a design. The fact that plants have a eukaryote, man considers them a eukaryote. I don't think the plants care what we call them. But we put pine trees are eukaryotes, so are humans. So you could classify things by, are they affected by gravity or not? Well, yeah, everything's affected by gravity. Oh, therefore they're all related. The fact that they've all got a cell with a cell nucleus bound in a membrane is not evidence they're related. It's a great design that works. I think somebody smart designed it.
Right. So what I'm trying to do is explain how clades work. So you don't outgrow your clade, but instead you make new clades. So clades is akin to a branch on a tree or a twig, where every twig remains rooted to the branch from whence it came, and then new twigs can sprout from that one, and so on and so on. So, for example, if you start with canids, as I was trying to explain, you have canids, and then from that canid clade, you have Canis lupus. And then from that Canis lupus clade, you have Canis lupus familiaris, and then from that Canis lupus familiaris clade, you have Canis lupus familiaris dachshund or Canis lupus familiaris Great Dane, right? So what's happening is each time a clade comes around, an additional name is added. So you just keep adding names on top names. But because we don't call organisms by all their clade names, no one goes around saying, oh, that's a nice Canis lupus familiaris poodle. We just say it's a poodle, right? So that's what happens. We don't call them by all their clade names. But if we were, then we would go around, when we see a human, we would say, oh, that's a eukaryotic, chordate, and we would just call all the clade names until you get to humans. So the clades is not changing. What's happening, more clades are being added.
So we should be called the amoeba, protista, sponge, vertebrate, Homo sapien. We should have. Do you believe you're related to a protista? Should we? Is that? My point is, you can believe that. That's not science. That's what I can't get you guys to understand. Because we see protista are still producing protista babies. That's all they ever do. Amoebas produce amoebas. Bacteria produce bacteria. There are no exceptions, none. But yet you wish to believe and imagine that this bacteria or protista somehow, over millions of generations, added more information and turned into a human. Because the books do show humans coming from protista. That's not science. That's all. I wish you guys would have just admit it and called it a religion and be happy. Start the Church of the Amoeba. That's fine. Go there. Saying, blessed assurance, the amoeba is mine, I can make a lot of songs for you, modify our songs in our songbook and make all kinds of songs about the amoeba. Praise to the amoeba, almighty amoeba. You don't see, I don't think, Mike, you do believe they grow out of their clade. The amoeba that finally became two-celled, did it grow out of its clade and become three-celled and then four-celled and multicellular? We see single-celled creatures work together as a colony. We've never seen a two-celled creature. It's usually on a colony working together for some reason, sometimes a whole bunch of them, but they're all individual amoeba or single-celled creatures. They never join like ours do, where my heart is dependent on my lungs, which is dependent on the nervous system, which is dependent on, it's interconnected in a way that no colony of cells ever gets connected that way.
Right. So with respect to outgrowing the clades, so as I said, the clades, you don't outgrow them, you grow new ones. So it's like a branch that grows a twig, and then the twig grows another twig. So every twig remains rooted to the twig it came from, and that remains rooted to the branch it came from, and then the branch remains rooted to the stem it came from, and so on. So you're never outgrowing it, you're just sprouting new ones. That's what's happening. So the eukaryote clade would sprout new clades, but they would not outgrow the eukaryote clade. So it's akin to a tree, if you want to picture it that way. It's akin to how a tree grows. Branches grow from other branches, but they don't outgrow their branches, well, unless you break them.
Well, I strongly disagree. I think there's a tree of humans. I think we all had a common ancestor named Adam and Eve. I don't think that would prove humans came from an amoeba or humans are related to pigs or birds. There's probably thousands of trees, but they're not connected. The humans are probably all connected. There's different skin color, different eye color, different hair color, different tall people, short people, wide people, skinny people. They're still human, all incapable of interbreeding. but they're still human. That's not evolution. There are no examples of this tree you're talking about connecting what anybody would consider wildly different kinds. Let's take, here they got the human and the fly off to the right, okay? The human and the fly go back to a common ancestor. I don't think that's science. Do you believe you're related to a fly, Mike?
Well, ultimately, all eukaryotic life is related. So yes, I would be related to a fly. What I'm saying is, if you wanted to understand how humans are related to other organisms, you can't start from animal A and then look at animal Z and then try to connect them. You need to look at like humans and then the ones closest to them and then the ones closest to them, and then you get a picture of what's going on. That's how you build puzzles, for example. You don't go, I'm going to choose this piece and then the furthest piece and try to get the picture. You try to build some, at least patches of it, using the closest pieces, and then you get a picture of what's going on, and then you continue building around that, and you build around that until you get the entire picture, right? So it makes no sense even attempting to show how humans are related to flies if we're not going to talk about how humans, or Homo sapiens, are related to Neanderthals and Denisovans and those closely related organisms that we classify with Homo sapiens.
Well, my objection is the kids in school are taught with charts just like this from a public school textbook or this one, that everything has a common ancestor. That is not observable science. That could be, there are 64 different varieties of herons, the big, huge bird. We got a family of them lives here on one of our lakes. Those 64 herons might have had a common ancestor, I'll grant you that, but that doesn't prove herons are related to pickles. There are 4,000 varieties of potatoes now, most of them cultivated by man for some particular reason, sweet potatoes, big potatoes, little potatoes, I don't know. But they might have had a common ancestor. I wouldn't argue about that. But does that therefore prove that if we went long enough, the potatoes came eventually from an amoeba and have a relationship with a bird? This is why I think it's a mental illness to believe these charts they put in the textbook. Here we have birds and dinosaurs and worms and sharks and clams. There are so many differences between these things, it's mind-boggling. And to imagine that they gradually change, okay, I understand, I admire your faith, but it's not science. We don't observe it. And the purpose of this debate, the title, is for you to provide evidence, reasonable evidence, for evolution. Not just saying it might happen, it could happen, maybe it did, well, it must have happened because here we are. Where's the scientific evidence of an amoeba producing what anybody in the world would consider a non-amoeba? Has a cow ever produced anything somebody would say, oh, that's not a cow anymore? Ask any farmer on the planet. Our donkey had a baby this morning. It turned out to be a baby donkey. Wow, who'd have thunk it? And it always will, no exceptions.
Let me jump in, Emo, just before you respond. Gentlemen, as always, these discussions are so enjoyable. And this one especially has been very intelligent, lots of great topics discussed. Time is flying by. Emo, since we do have a ton of audience questions, is there one final line of evidence you wanted to bring up, one final question you wanted to ask Dr. Dino? Because I see about a minute and a half on the discussion portion from my timer. So of course, respond to that. And then maybe one final point or one final question that you really want to get out before the discussion ends. Go ahead.
Okay. Also, I wanted to ask, are cherries distinct from, I don't know, almonds? Or do you think cherries are distinct from almonds?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't have a quick answer. I'm willing to study it. Almonds don't have a fruit that we consider. Man has decided to divide the plants into those that have fruit surrounding a seed and those that just have a seed or a shell surrounding the seed, a non-edible shell. So I'm not sure how they classify cherries and almonds. But I'd be willing to bet you $50 the cherry's not related to the pig. That I would bet you.
Do you know that cherries and almonds are classified together with peaches within the same kind?
I don't think they care how we classify them. Man is always trying to put things into classification systems. We put our screwdrivers together and put our wrenches together and our hammers together. I don't think the tool cares. I don't think the cherry tree cares. The fact that we decided to put it with something else, okay, I don't think the tree cares. cherry trees only produce baby cherries that grow up to be cherry trees again. That I know. They're never going to produce an almond.
Well, yeah, but why are they classified within the same kind though? Actually, they could graft. It's possible for cherries to graft to almonds and peaches.
Yeah, as I showed you, the definition of species, let's see, 36. The definition of species has been changing. It still changes. What is the definition of species? Nobody knows. There are 7 distinct definitions of the word species. So is a cherry and an almond different species? Oh, certainly. Are they the same kind? I don't think so. Are they in the same kingdom? Well, yeah, they're plant kingdom.
No, they're classified as the same kind because of their grafting compatibility. Grafting compatibility is a criteria used to classify kinds, just as pollinating compatibility and sexual compatibility in animals, right? So
Cherry,
that's a,
wait a minute. Cherry and almond can be grafted together. They might be. Is that true? Okay. Can you graft a cherry onto a giraffe?
no, they're too far removed.
Okay. Well, there's 2 that are different kind.
All right, let me jump in here, gentlemen. This has been a great discussion. And as always in the live chat, we've got a great chat with some side debates and some side, just a lot of fun going on. So great debate, great discussion, gentlemen. We will cap it there. The timer just went off for the discussion. We got a lot of great questions too. But what I want to do, in case you gentlemen have some points you feel you want to address, anything left hanging, so on and so forth, let's have some concluding statements. Let's do, let's say, between 3 and 5 minutes. And call me, email. We'll let you start, and then whatever you take, we'll just let Kent take equal time. And this way you can kind of sum up your thoughts and points. And yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready there, Mikey.
All right. So the problem is I can provide evidence of evolution, but for some reason it doesn't count as, at least it doesn't meet some undefined criteria that Kent has. So what I'm trying to do is get that criteria and see if I can meet it, right? Because he says he wants to see evidence of organisms change in kind. I know what different kinds look like. I showed a lot of them. But there is no criteria as to how an organism can diversify into a new kind, because kinds seem to be defined as clades, where kinds can diversify indefinitely and would never outgrow their kinds, regardless of how much they change. So that's why you can have, for example, peaches, almonds and cherries within the same kind, and then you have corn and bamboo and sugarcane in the same kind, and you have tomato and eggplant and peppers within the same kind, and so on, because there is no limit as to how much a kind can diversify. And that's the point. So it would be a futile quest trying to show a change in kind when there has no set limit as to how much a kind can diversify before it becomes a new kind. I'll also show what different kinds look like, right? And the thing is, different kinds are not actually distinct, because there are different kinds of bats, there are different kinds of frogs, different kinds of crocodilians. They're not actually that distinct in the way they classify them using environmentology. So the fact that Kent wants to see like a bird, like an amoeba give rise to a bird, is way beyond what creationists would use to define different kinds, right? What else? Yeah, so most of the argument here was basically around me trying to determine what is the criteria for a kind. Oh, and we talk about like name assignment. We talk about like birds giving birth to birds or dogs giving birth to dogs. This is just names. These are just the names we call the organisms. The names are not important. What's important is the changes between them, not the name. Because organisms, for example, if a pig evolved wings, just by hypothetical, right? If it evolved wings, it's still going to be a pig, but the change between them, would that count? And that's what I'm interested in, the change, and not the name of, oh, the amoeba still produce amoeba. I know it still produces amoeba. That's the name we chose to call them, and we chose to call their offspring that, until someone just decides to reassign a name to them. All right? What else? Yeah, I think that's it for now. Yeah, that would be it for my closing statement for now. I don't really have much to say because most of the argument was really around those specific points.
Okay, I appreciate that concluding statement there, Mikey. And I also appreciate you gentlemen making this debate very easy to moderate, very professional and cordial. So we're going to hand it over to Dr. Kent Hovind for his 5-minute concluding statement. Go ahead, Kent.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Mike, for coming to do this tonight. I think we've all seen gibbons produce gibbons. We've seen chimpanzees produce chimpanzees. We've seen humans produce humans. Never seen anything other than that. So they draw lines here showing them all connected. Well, that's not science. You got I think you got 5 different trees. The gorillas have their own tree. Now, atheists, I keep asking, where's the evidence for why you believe such a thing, that humans and gibbons have a common ancestor? They draw the lines on paper. They make the kids learn it in school, and they test them on it and flunk them if they don't give the answer they want. This is propaganda 101 here. Where's real scientific evidence that a chimpanzee's ever produced a non-chimpanzee? The fact that we have similar DNA doesn't prove ancestry. I could show you books in my library that have the similar alphabet. They all use the same 26 letter. Doesn't prove the same guy wrote them all. So I think you're in a dangerous position, Mike, and you may be leading others to believe this. Wayne Strickland said he's an atheist. Had it on his tombstone for years. Well, the fool said in his heart there's no God. Ray Comfort, a good friend of mine, talked to him yesterday. He's got a book out, God Doesn't Believe in Atheists. I like that one. Well, it looks like Wayne found time. He died about 17 years ago. Because he found time. I bet he's not an atheist anymore. It's appointed unto man once to die, and after this, the judgment. Mike, you're going to die one day. I hope it's a long time from now, but it could be tomorrow. You don't know. Have you seen the way they drive in Grenada? You could die tonight. They got some loonies down there. They even have an IQ test to drive. Anyway, God's not willing that any should perish. He wants everybody to be saved. My job is to go preach the gospel to every creature. I got to tell you, God loves you, but he wants you to be part of his family. There's a God. He made it. And no, he said all animals bring forth after their kind. It's all we've ever seen. I've chosen to believe that. That's my faith. I take that by faith. Pine trees will always produce pine trees, always have, always will. That's science. To believe pine trees came from an amoeba and are related to bananas and whales, that's not science. So if you're a Christian, I challenge everybody as often as I can, what on earth are you doing, for heaven's sake? Can't you find something to do for the Lord? There's a war going on. Get involved. Carry bullets or pay for bullets or take care of the wounded or do something. God created everything, and we're all going to appear before the judgment seat of Christ. I'm going to appear before God one day, and he's going to say, Kent, I gave you this much, and you did this much. What happened to the difference here? I'm going to answer to God for what he's given me. And I don't cook, I don't sew, don't like those, but I can talk about creation and give him the glory for his creation. So I think insects, there are insects with wings and insects without wings. Still insects. If the pig had wings, I think we'd have to put them into 2 categories and say, wow, there's a flying pig and a crawling pig, I think, or a walking pig. They might have some similarities. Doesn't make them related. Anyway, thank you for the debate. I'm anxious for audience questions here. And come down and visit our dinosaur adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. It's all free. And it's a really, really, really fun time. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kent, for that concluding statement. Thank you to the both of you. Very engaging and a very good debate. I really enjoyed this, and so did the audience. So let's go right back to, I guess, the first questions that came in. And we'll start with some of these super chats that came in. I appreciate everybody's support and engagement in the live chat. So here's the first question that comes in the form of a super chat. I'm going to get them into the live chat and put them up on the screen for you guys. So here's the first one that comes in from Bubblegum Gun. He says, question for Emo. Do you think a Chihuahua could ever evolve or change into a wolf? Go ahead, Emo.
Right. So if you're talking about lineages, no, organisms can't evolve into lineages that already exist. So you never see like a Chihuahua turning back into a wolf or whatever. You can get something that looks like a wolf, but it's going to be a different lineage. So you're not going to get the same lineage twice. You're not going to get the same organisms evolving twice. You're going to get something similar through convergent evolution.
I appreciate that response there, Emo. And over to you, Kent, for your response.
I would agree. It cannot. Chihuahua was never going to turn into a wolf. I think the varieties of dog kinds have been created. Probably had a common ancestor called something was similar to a wolf. But now that they've gotten down to Chihuahua size into the completely useless dog, I think it's probably dead-ended, and left alone in the woods, they wouldn't survive 2 days. The squirrels would eat them, for heaven's sake, let alone the other animals would kill them. So no, I don't. I do think dog, wolf, coyote probably had a common ancestor, but that doesn't mean they can all have a banana as part of their heritage. So I think that's ludicrous. I stick by the Bible. They always bring forth after their kind. Dogs, wolves, chihuahuas, same kind. Never going to be anything else.
Thank you, Kent, for your response. And to be fair, Emo, question was for you. You can have a quick final word.
Yeah, it's not that dogs, quote unquote, are losing information. They have most of the alleles from their ancestors. The reason why they can't go back into wolves is because you'd have to, every mutation that took place or every change that took place to bring them to chihuahuas would have to happen in reverse and in that order. In the same order it happened, it'd have to happen in that reverse order, which is impossible since mutations accumulate, not go in reverse.
All right, I appreciate the responses and the question from Bubblegum Gun. So here's the next question that comes in. Another super chat, Michael Knighton. I appreciate the support, brother. And this one is for you, Dr. Hovind. So he says, ask Kent if he believes in speciation and why. And then he kind of just points out that some young Earth creationists have a problem with speciation and others don't. What are your overall thoughts on that, Kent?
As I mentioned earlier, there's really never been a good, strong, hard definition of species. It's a flexible term. I thought that was here. Let me see if this is the right one. No, anyway. So I would say speciation, certainly, but that's a man-made classification. Man has decided he likes to call things by a certain name and give it a new name and call it a new species, Canis lupus, Canis domesticus, etc. I don't think the animal cares, and I don't think they're going to change because we changed the name of them. So yes, I think there's never going to be a new kind. Pigs will always produce pigs. Cows will always produce cows. Corn will always produce corn. Always has, always will. That's what we observe. That's what God said would happen. So if somebody decides to call it a new species, like the Kaibab squirrel and the Abert squirrel, they're still a squirrel. They've been separated by Grand Canyon for a long time, so maybe they can't interbreed anymore. I don't know. But they're still squirrel. Maybe they both reach the ends of a tree, different branches on a same tree, squirrel. There's, I think, 13 different kinds of squirrels. And they might have had a common ancestor called a squirrel. But so if somebody decides to give it a name and call it a new species, that's an arbitrary human tag we stick on there. They're still the same kind. So I don't believe there's any changes between kinds. I'll stick with the Bible word. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. And again, Michael, thank you for the good question. Emo, over to you for your response.
It seems to me that kind, at least how Kent is using it, a kind seems to be a group of organisms that shares the same name. So you have like a dog kind or a grass kind or a butterfly kind. As long as the organisms share the same name, apparently, then that would determine if they're the same kind or not.
Thank you, Mikey. And Kent, question was for you. We'll hand it over to you for the final word.
Yeah, no, nothing to add. Go ahead.
All right, I appreciate it. Let me get the next question up on screen. And I'm almost going to lose it because here we go. All right, so this one comes in from Kevin's Biblical Discussions. And his question is looks like it's for you, Emo. So he asks, what is the best evidence you have to prove macroevolution? Mikey, I understand you would probably say it's more of a cumulative case, a body of evidence coming to one conclusion. So another way to ask it could be, if there's just someone on the fence that you were talking to, you only had a few minutes, what would be a strong line of evidence out of that body of evidence you would look to that you could point to that may or may not be convincing? Go ahead.
First I'd have to know who I'm talking to. What kind of evidence they accept. But usually I would go through pollinating compatibility and then grafting compatibility. Why? Because most people accept that this kind of compatibility is evidence of common ancestry. And then I can show you how macroevolution occurs, maybe not directly, although we have observed direct examples of macroevolution. But what that person is talking about is like organisms becoming different to the point where they are noticeably different, right? So then I can show you how onions and garlics are related through pollination and so on. And you say, oh, I didn't know onions and garlics could pollinate. I say, yeah, they can pollinate. They're very closely related. And you can use that as evidence of the common ancestry. And then I say, okay, you know that, well, you might know these plants by their local names. I can show you that cherries can pollinate with other black cherries and so on, and they can graft with almonds and so on. And say, oh, I didn't know they can graft. So yeah, only closely related organisms graft. So when we see organisms grafting, we assume they're related.
Thank you, Emo, for the question, the good question from Kevin's Biblical Discussions. Dr. Hovind, over to you if you wanted some points to make or a response to go with.
Right. I don't think the fact that we can graft them proves anything as far as relationships. There have been some really wild grafting experiments done, grafting pears and apples together. And I think there's one company that sells 20 different fruits grafted on one tree. That's something man is doing. It's not happening in nature, and it wouldn't prove any relationship. I bet you could probably find a way to sew a pig leg onto a human and make it take, but I don't know if that can be done or not. Just as an example, you probably could get a pig ear sewed onto somebody's shoulder and make it graft. Let's assume you can. Okay, what does that prove? Proves somebody's got way too much time on their hand to do dumb stuff. How are you going to get a shirt to fit on with the ear sticking out there? Anyway, so I think the fact that we can graft them is not evidence that they're related. Go ahead.
Right. I'm talking about true grafting, not like the grafting you see when people graft like pig organs to humans and so on. True grafting needs no suppression of the host or the scion DNA, right? So when true grafting, you don't need to suppress the DNA. They would graft, they would actually heal into each other, and they would exchange genes, they would exchange organelles between their cells. They're totally compatible with each other. So that's why grafting compatibility is used as evidence for common ancestry, because only close related organisms do so. And biominologists actually use this as a method of classifying kinds, right? And not only biominologists, but even members of this particular channel.
Okay, thank you for that final word there, Emo. These are some fantastic questions as always. So thank you guys. Here's the next question that comes in from Power Word. This is a super chat. I appreciate the support. And this again is a question for you, Emo. So the questioner asks, since all three branches of life, and in brackets, he puts bacteria, archaea, eukarya, came from Luca, last universal common ancestor, does that mean Luca broke the law of monophily? Go ahead, Mikey.
I can actually share a screen of this to kind of I'll just do a quick screen share to show what I'm talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, window. All right. I have it. Sure.
You're good to go. I'll remove the questions so we can see your slide fully.
Come on. Okay. Far down. So where is it? So it's the tree of life. All those clades diverge from the original life form, which we would just call life. So they're still living things. All living things are still living things, are still life. So they never outgrow their clade. All living things are still classified under the life clade, essentially. So that's it.
All right, I appreciate the visual there, Mikey, and over to Ken. Ken, if you had a response, go ahead.
Could you put the question back up for me just a second?
Yes, definitely. Let me just scroll up and see if I can find it here in the chat. Oh, here we go. Okay, so Power Word. Here's the question, Dr. Hovind. Since all three branches of life, bacteria, archaea, eukarya, came from last universal common ancestor, does that mean Luca broke the law of monophily?
I would think it had to. That's why I kept saying, if an amoeba changed to everything else, well, monophily says it can't get out of its clade. The amoeba are in a separate clade from elephants, but they think the amoeba produced an elephant. So yes, they don't either understand what the law of monophyly is or don't really believe in it, because the charts, the tree of life that they show all the time, shows everything breaking the law of monophyly, everything. So I think it's a good question. I don't think there is a last common ancestor. I think we all had, humans had a common ancestor, apples had a common ancestor, but not apples and humans together. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. And Emo, last word. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Ken must have a slight misunderstanding with clades bringing forth new clades as opposed to clades changing clades. Remember, branches sprout new branches, and those branches sprout twigs, but they remain rooted to the branches from whence they came. Right? That's the analogy if you want to understand how clades give rise to new clades.
Okay, I appreciate the final word. And this next one comes in from Ken Rock. Ken Rock gives a super chat to ask his question, so I appreciate it. And this is one of Kent's future interlocutors here in the Evolution Debate Challenge series. So, Ken, I appreciate the question. His question for you here is up on screen. He says, question for Kent. What is your, or the, I guess, definition of dog?
Wow. Scientific definition, I'm sure they've got one. I think it's a mammal. I think it's only able to interbreed with other dogs. There's varieties of dogs, 339 recognized breeds by the American Kennel Association, probably more worldwide. So I think it's an animal that has 4 feet, tail on the back, nose on the front, ears on the top, and only wants to breed with other dogs. How's that?
I appreciate it, Dr. Dino. Over to you, Emo, if you had something you wanted to add.
No, nothing to add.
All right, I appreciate that. So next question here comes in from, let's see, out of the 100 questions, what can I pick? So I guess we'll just pick this one here. This one's for you again, Kent. And the question comes in from Cool Jesus. So Cool Jesus, I appreciate it. Question for Kent. Are there groups of animal kinds that a 4th grader may not be able to tell are kinds? And in brackets, he just gives a couple examples: civets, vultures, solenodons.
Oh, yes. Science has many different levels to it. There's 1st grade level science and college level science and advanced level. Sure, this is a study, but in general, I think, like I said, 99%, high 99%, 0.999, would be distinguishable to a 4th or 5th grader. They go, oh yeah, that's a dog. We have kids come here. We have our cook Freddie has a 3-year-old. When I point to the dog, I say, wow, look at the pig. He said, no, that's a dog. The kid's 3. He can tell. So I think generally a 3-year-old can tell you most of them. Might be some animals that are difficult to classify, like, where would the armadillo go? Where would the duck-billed platypus go? Lays eggs, but it's a mammal. I don't think they care how we classify them. I did a seminar the other night here on where does the 2 of clubs go? How do we classify the 2 of clubs? Does it go with the clubs or does it go with the even numbers? If it goes with the clubs, it doesn't go with the 2 of hearts. But if it goes with the even numbers, now it goes with the 2 of hearts. So how we decide to spread them out, I don't think the 2 of clubs cares. It's purely man-made classification, and the animals do not care. The dogs always mate with dogs. The cows mate with cows, no exceptions. And when they produce babies, a 3-year-old can tell you that's a cow. So most of the time, it's pretty simple. There are some difficult ones to classify, and that's what what one field of science is supposed to be doing. There's a website called Bearmanology. Bearman is the Hebrew word for kind. And they've been working on they think there's about 8,000 kinds of animals on land who breathe air. They would have to go on the ark. Noah didn't bring the fish on the ark. They had plenty of water. He didn't bring insects. Wasn't told to anyway. Some might have gone. But 8,000 kinds of animals that now have probably tens of thousands or hundreds or maybe even millions of varieties from those 8,000 kinds. That is very different than trying to claim all the animals came from a rock, which is what evolution teaches. Rock was our common ancestor. I think that's dumb. Go ahead.
All right, I appreciate it, Dr. Dino and Emo. Anything you'd like to add? Go ahead.
So the thing about the kinds, you talking about Bearmanology, and that's good. is I actually showed what different kinds look like, and what I was trying to find out is what is objectively preventing two neighboring kinds, like you'd have different kinds of turtles, for example, from sharing common ancestry with each other, right? And so that's what I'm interested in, finding out how are kinds distinguished from the kinds closest to them, and so on. And most kids actually don't know how to distinguish between them. I actually tried it with kids, and they would just classify different kinds as the same kind, and sometimes the same kind as different kinds. It happens.
Thank you for the response, Mikey. And Dr. Hovind, you get the last response since it was your question.
Yeah, I don't think the animals care how we classify them or how the kids classify them. We have a dog around here that belongs to one of our guys, and every time I say, "Come here, idiot," it comes. So it's an idiot, but it still comes.
I appreciate that. Laughter is the best medicine. It's good to get a little bit of that in every debate. So I appreciate it. I want to make sure I get these super chats in, gentlemen. So I'm going to put this one up on screen. This one's more of a comment, but it is a $20 super chat. It comes in from George Bond, not really related to the topic, but of course, Emo and Kent, if you guys wanted to make some comments on it, you're free to do so. So George, $20 super chat. I appreciate it. He says, operational science has demonstrated stratification does not need millions of years. 20 minutes is all it took to create anticlines, synclines, and basins. Check it out on the Creation Research Net channel, John Mackay, the creation guy. So I appreciate that, George. More of a comment. I'm not sure, gentlemen, if there's something you wanted to add to that or comment.
I would, if Emo doesn't.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Owen.
All of the layers that we see form very rapidly. All over the world, we see petrified trees standing up, running through all these layers. There's no such thing as a geologic column. They say the top layer is younger. I say, where did it come from? Outer space? If I shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? No. If you flip this thing upside down and make multiple different layers in there, which it'll do every time, it'll make 20 or 30 layers. Are the layers different ages? No. They got sorted by the water. So the Bible to the evolutionist is the geologic column. There's no such thing as a Jurassic period or Triassic or Mississippian or Devonian or Silurian. It's all baloney. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a fossil record. There's fossils. Lots. We got a lot in our museum. But they don't talk, and they don't have a date on them. Somebody assigns a date to them. The fossil doesn't care. So there's no such thing. I think it's criminal to teach kids that all the animals are related, and we came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago that cooled down and got rained on. I think that's dumb, real dumb. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. And Emo, over to you for a response if you'd like.
Oh yeah, I'm not too familiar with the geology stuff, although I know they are like mechanisms that can cause deposited regions of Earth to rise up above, so they don't have to. The rock doesn't have to come from space. It's just like lower regions can rise up. There are mechanisms that can cause the Earth to churn and move. But I'm not too familiar with the geology stuff, so I have not much to say.
All right, I appreciate that, Mikey. Here's the final super chat, at least, so we know we got these in. Let me see here. This one comes in from Alec Cox, $20 super chat, and it is for you there, Emo. So I got it up on screen, and he asks, would you go to be executed over your belief in evolution theory? Would you renounce evolution if it meant that you would be executed? What are your thoughts on that, Emo?
Would I renounce my belief? If I know I'm going to be executed, anything I can do to save my life, I would just say it. But I would actually change my core beliefs. Saying something out aloud doesn't mean that it changes my belief. So to save my life, if I have to lie sometimes, it's according to the circumstance, then yeah, I'll do it.
All right, well, I appreciate you answering that question there, Mikey. Anything you wanted to add at all, Dr. Hovind?
I think we've seen down through history that millions of Christians have had to do exactly that, face death or renounce Christ. And millions have said, no, kill me instead. I hope if it ever comes to that for me, I have the courage to say that. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, yeah, I would, but wait till you get there and they got the axe over your head. So I think I would. I hope I would. I want, I want to stay true to my Lord to the end. So I'll say, I hope I can. I think it will come. Well, you're muted. Oh.
There we go. I appreciate it. So I want to wrap it up there, though, guys. There are a ton of questions more, and you know what? We said 90 minutes, and as always, time flies by. So we're going to wrap it up. I want to respect the time of the debaters, Emo and Kent. So as we always do, though, before we completely wind it down, let's get some final thoughts, final words from Mikey and Kent. This really was a great debate. And wow, time has flown by. So, Emo, over to you. Final thoughts, final words, and thank you for doing this.
Right. Oh, you're welcome, Standing, for having me on the show. Thank you, Dr. Kent, for agreeing to debate me, even though you didn't know who I was. What I want to say is, I think we're having like a disconnect with name reassignment and how clades evolve. How names are assigned to clades and so on. So we have this thing where Kent can't envision how a dog can give rise to non-dogs, when it's just down to name reassignment, because that's all about the names. We're having a problem with setting a criteria with respect to changes that would count as macroevolution, but it needs to be a criteria. When I say macroevolution, I mean in the context Kent would use it, right? So you have a criteria set, and then we know, okay, this would count because it passes a criteria, and this wouldn't count because it does not. But since Kent doesn't have a criteria to begin with, then I don't know why something would count as opposed to why something would not count. There's no criteria for me to judge that on. Kinds, there is no criteria as to what would constitute a new kind. How diverse a kind must become before they become a new kind, I have no idea. And the thing is, it's not the responsibility of me to identify kinds. That's actually a creationist thing. So they would have to set their own criteria for new kinds. They can identify different kinds because kinds are arbitrarily assigned. It's like a genus or a family or order, arbitrarily assigned. But you can't evolve a new genus because there is no criteria for that. In the same way, you can't evolve a new kind. There is no criteria for that. You can only assign them arbitrarily. And what else?
Emo, I'll just stop you. I guess by final words, final thoughts, I meant just, quick kind of wrap up, not really another concluding statement, although I do appreciate that. So if you wanted to just maybe 10 more seconds, kind of wrap it up, we'll give the opportunity to Kent as well, and then we'll call it a night.
All right. I guess I'll say thanks again for having me, and thanks again, Kent, for making the time to come out debate.
All right. I appreciate that. I appreciate those final words there, Mikey. We appreciate you doing this debate. Maybe we'll do another one in the future. This one went smoothly. Kent, over to you. Final thoughts, final words, and thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm curious if you atheists or evolutionists do succeed in getting everybody in the world to believe like you. If everybody believed we came from an amoeba, would that be good or bad for society? Would you want to live in a world where everybody believes there's no such thing as right and wrong because there's no God? Nobody made us. We got here by chance, and the strongest survive. So if the lion can eat the baby zebra and the mama zebra don't like it, too bad. Tough. I think the theory that you are teaching, Mike, if everybody did believe it, would be very detrimental for the world and for society. If everybody believed like I believe, there's a God and he made some rules and we're supposed to follow those rules, whether they do it, it certainly would improve society in many ways. There's a standard for right and wrong. Thus saith the Lord. So if you succeed in teaching this to everybody and getting them to believe it, I think the whole world will lose. That's my thoughts.
Okay, I appreciate that, Kent. Again, I appreciate it, Emo. Gentlemen, you guys are free to go, and I appreciate you doing this. Have a good night. This was great. Thank you to the audience. Thanks for tuning in. God bless. And Standing for Truth is out, although I'll be back in 2 minutes, guys, for the usual reminders and announcements. So We'll
All
see
right.
you in a bit.
Thank you.
All right, we are back. There we go. Another one in the books. That was actually a fantastic debate. I really enjoyed the discussion. My job was easy tonight. Both Mikey and Kent were extremely cordial. They were sophisticated in their dialogue, and the points that were discussed were great. So I really enjoyed that one. This evolution debate series we've been doing for 2022 has been a blast. Although a lot of work. I want to thank the debaters, of course. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have this series and these debates, but it has been worth it. It's been a ton of fun. And Mark Drysdale, I appreciate that. Mark. I want to thank you for making a great debate just a few nights ago. That debate, we almost set a record. We're at about 400 people live for that debate. And I think it's already at like 6,000 or 7,000 views. So if you haven't yet seen that debate, check that out. Mark versus Kent will probably be getting another one of those. Awesome, great debate. I agree. So Mikey and Kent made for a really, really enjoyable discussion. Again, guys, as I've pointed out, we've got debates on this topic pretty much set until probably the rapture. But I'm always taking more requests. And we're really filling up this year with debates. So if you're an evolutionist out there and you want to take up the challenge, as you can see here, we've hosted now about 161 debates. And we strive to keep them professional, cordial, and sophisticated. Although, of course, I'm a young earth creationist. I do my best to stay neutral as moderator during these debates, making sure that it is fair for both sides. So logical, plausible, probable. He is a busy man as well. He has been awesome in terms of hosting all these after shows for this new Evolution Debate Challenge series. So John, I appreciate that. He says the after show is going to happen. Dumpster fire is highly likely. So the last couple of nights have been a great after show as well. Especially the one from a few nights ago between Mark and Kent. That one, we went all night, 6-7 hours. Tonight, I'll probably join a little bit, although I personally have a debate coming up that I want to prep for, get some slides going, and make sure that me and Luca Medugno give you guys a good show. So the topic is there evidence for human evolution? We as a team here at Standing for Truth Ministries are actually working. We have been for both the last 6 months on a new book focusing on specifically human evolution and the separate ancestry model. That's actually called the Human Evolution Handbook. So I'm going to be doing several debates on this topic in the next few months, since this is currently my main focus, guys. So that'll be in a couple days. And we also we're going to be mixing it up because I believe it's the 4th. We're going to have a debate on oneness and the Trinity. So we like to mix it up for you guys. We like to give you guys a diversity of topics when it comes to debates and discussions. So this one will be Kelly Powers and Rodney Smith. They will be debating, is oneness biblical? So this will definitely be a lot of fun, an important debate for sure. And next week, the much anticipated debate. I'm pumped for this. Tom Jump and Dr. Hovind. This is going to be a huge one. Is evolution a reasonable scientific theory? Professor David McQueen. He's going to be debating Taylor, aka Snake was right. I think Snake was right in Jackson Rowe. They're going to have a debate one of these days titled, Who's Had More Debates with Creationists, Taylor or Jackson? So I appreciate both those guys and respect the fact that they never back down from a debate and a challenge. At the end of the month, the much anticipated debate between Chris Dade and Dr. Shabir Ali. Does the NT teach that Jesus is God? And another main event, guys, this March, we've been doing this now, I think for 3 years. We've hosted 160 debates, over 100 interviews and lectures. But you know what? this March 2022 is the biggest month yet for us. I mean, we've got shows almost every single day. And although we'll typically have a few main events per month, this month we've got, I think, at least 10 main events. So it is, it's a month of fun, put it that way. We just hit our 8,000 subscribers, as well as roughly 20,000 on our secondary channel, guys. So I appreciate the support. As I always say, you guys are the life and blood of this channel. So this debate is going to be, does the Bible teach salvation is by faith alone? Debate on sola fide, two powerhouses in the debate world when it comes to theology and soteriology, Dr. Robert Sanjanis and Kelly Powers. Let me see here. What else do we got? Okay, well, I would just recommend, guys, check the upcoming live stream section for all the upcoming events, including debates, discussions, and interviews. And call me Emo. I appreciate you doing this. Guys, this was a ton of fun. So stay tuned. We got plenty more debates, discussions, and lectures and other videos and things like that for you. So if you're not yet subscribed, but you love these types of events, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. And also share around this content, because the truth is important. And of course, critical thinking is incredibly important. So we will see you all at John Maddox and his after show. And we'll see you guys again in a couple days for a debate on human evolution between myself and Luca Medugno. God bless. Standing for Truth is out.